Welcome to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do this without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to start by saying thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to thank our platinum sponsors, Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gilman Gear, always a step ahead. Camp Mobile, where teams communicate better. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. Thank you to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Carol Dozibrin. She's the Certified Master Athletic Administrator, and she's currently the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Athletic Directors Association. Carol, welcome to the podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here, Jake. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this.
Oh, absolutely. We only have the best on our show. You certainly are at the top of that list. Well, as you know, the life of an athletic director is always busy, especially in these times. So we're going to jump right in. We always like to let our guests hear a little bit about our ADs. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and maybe how your love of sports got you involved in teaching and coaching.
Okay, I grew up in Salem, New Hampshire, which at the time was a small town on the Massachusetts border. And it's now one of the largest towns in our state. It should probably be a city at this point. But I grew up with a younger brother, and I really enjoyed being active as a child. And honestly, in the time that I grew up, there weren't all the sports leagues that are available to girls at this point. And, you know, I used to go to my brother's games, Little League games, and just wish that I could be a part of that. And, but, you know, back in the early 60s, those things didn't happen. So I went to St. Mary's High School in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and which is now closed. It merged with Central Catholic High School. St. Mary's was an all-girls school, and across the street there was the all-boys high school, Central Catholic. So, you know, my mom was a big believer in getting involved, and she said, I don't care what you do, but get involved in something. So because I like sports, I tried out for the basketball team, and I made it. So I'm not sure how that really happened, but I made the team, and I played on the school team for 4 years. We had very limited sports at that time. We did have a volleyball club that started, and we had a softball club that started. So I got involved in those two clubs as well. But like I said, I was always active as a kid. I was always on my bike, you know, always running around crazy. So then I went on to Plymouth State College, which is now Plymouth State University. But I was a physical education major, and, you know, it was just my love of sports that got me involved in that. And at the time I graduated, it was really tough to get a job because there were a lot of people who had education degrees and wanted to be teachers. And I took a part-time job my first year, and then it worked into a full-time job after that. And did a little bit of coaching basketball, and then moved on to, after those 2 years, moved on to a middle school, stayed there for 10 years, did some coaching, and that's where I became an athletic director. After that, moved on to another school for 10 years. I wasn't coaching there. I was a part-time teacher and an athletic director. And then my last 19 years before I retired, I was a full-time athletic administrator. So, and then took the athletic executive director's position in New Hampshire the year before I retired. So I'm in my third year now in that position.
Wow, what an incredible career. I want to go back to those high school days because those were, pre-Title IX, early Title IX. As you were a student athlete during those days, was there any sense of, I guess the only word I can come up with, unfairness that, boys sports had all this and there wasn't at that time the same opportunities for girls, or did you all just, play and this is what it was?
I'm not sure that there was that kind of an awareness at that time, maybe more so in a public school, but, we knew what the boys were doing in their school. And that was the social piece of it, going over to watch the boys play. But, we knew what we had in our school. So there really wasn't a feeling of that's not fair. We were happy that we were able to do what we were able to do. And we traveled, we had a full slate of games. So, but we had, there was another girls' high school in the next town, and the cheerleading squad for that all-boys high school was made up of my school and that other school. So the girls from both schools tried out for the cheering squad, and they cheered for the football team at the all-boys high school. So that was a different kind of rivalry, if you can imagine.
No, I've actually spent a little bit of time early in my career at Catholic schools, know all about it. In our business, we always talk about the importance of leadership and mentorship. And I'm curious, who were some of your mentors growing up, either, teachers or coaches, or maybe even people that you worked with or worked for during your career?
Mm-hmm. I think first and foremost, I would say my parents. I learned about work ethic and I learned about excellence from my parents. They would jump in with both feet in anything that they did, whether it was, my mom was a stay-at-home mom while I was growing up, which in this day and age is quite unusual, but it wasn't when I was a kid. And, but I'll tell you, the things that she did around the house and out in the yard, she worked really hard all the time. My dad was a building contractor and he worked like crazy. And right now, when there's times when I get stuck on something, whether it's something related to being an athletic administrator or just something doing around the house, the first question that comes to mind is, what would Dad do? And, because I go back to his work ethic and the way he could figure things out. And I guess I didn't realize this until later on in life, but probably my basketball coach in high school was one of my mentors. She was also the physical education teacher at our high school. And, she made not only our practices fun and the whole team aspect fun, but our physical education classes were fun too. And I think that's maybe why I chose the path I chose, or one of the reasons why. I had a principal when I was working in a middle school for 10 years who was one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. And, he told it like it was, but challenged you. And when he knew that he could get more out of you, he'd really make it work so that you were working to your potential, if not beyond at times. But I've had some wonderful relationships with people through the NIAAA. And, you know, Fred Balsamo is a perfect example of someone who really got me involved in the NIAAA. And that was back in like the mid 90s when we got together. I know that seems like, you know, eons ago, but we got together and he asked me to be a part of the, it was 503 at the time. He wanted me to be part of that curriculum writing for that LTC class. So that just kind of, you know, spurred me into the NIAAA family, and it's been a great ride.
Let's go and talk about that a little bit. You know, you and I have been doing this for a while. This is my 40th year. I think you've done it maybe 1 or 2 years more than me. But we have a lot of young ADs that listen to our podcast, and I don't think they realize the process that, you know, someone like us, you know, goes through over years to get involved locally, get involved at the state level, get involved with NIAAA. Go ahead and share your story a little bit about how you first got involved, let's say at the state level, and then how that developed into what you have done and continue to do with NIAAA.
When I was at the middle school, the high school athletic director at the time had said to me, you know, there's this high school organization for athletic directors, and I'd really like you to be a part of that. And I said, well, what do I have to do? And he said, well, he said, I can get the district to pay for your membership. And he said, they do have a conference. And, you know, I was coaching at the time, so I wasn't sure that I could make the conference, but he said, you know, there's some valuable information that we share on a regular basis with each other. And he said, I'd love for you to be able to, you know, to take advantage of that. So, so I did become a member of our state organization. And then he said, I'm going to pay your national dues. Well, at that time, I didn't know what he was talking about. So, so I was like, okay, if somebody's paying for it, like, why not, right? And so I really didn't take advantage of the NIAAA opportunities at that time, but I did decide that I really wanted to move on and become a high school athletic administrator. And when some jobs opened up, I applied for them. And, you know, he was a great friend in getting me acclimated to that. So when there was an opening on our spring conference committee, I said, you know, I'd like to help out and see what I can do. So, you know, it was little by little, you know, getting involved in different committees. And I was involved with our state Interscholastic Athletic Association and served on a couple of their committees as well. So, you know, I knew some people in the state that I probably never would have had the opportunity to otherwise meet. And so getting involved in our State Athletic Administrators Association was really beneficial because I did have the opportunity to, you know, to meet people in different divisions and do some work that would not have been something that would have come across my desk otherwise. So then I was a part of the executive board at the time. Our executive board was moving through the chairs. So you went on as an at-large member. And, you know, a lot of the roles weren't as formalized as they are today. But, you know, and then you became the secretary, the treasurer, then the secretary, and then, you know, vice presidents and, you know, then president and president, past president. So, so I, you know, I went through all those chairs and that was very early in my career. That was in the, you know, mid 90s. So, you know, but at that time, I was interested in the NIAAA, and I think it was in 1991 when I first went to my NIAAA conference, and it was held in Orlando. And I had just been through a traumatic brain injury in the spring, and part of what I needed to do for me was prove to myself that I can do some of the things that I used to be able to do. And so one of the goals I set for myself was to take the CAA exam. And back then, it wasn't, the way it is now. There wasn't a manual that you could go through. There weren't LTC classes that you could take. So I was sitting by the pool at the Marriott when everyone else is out having a good time. And I'm reading IAA magazine and going through all these things because I was just I was incensed on making sure that I could pass that exam. So I took the exam and, and I waited and I waited, and for some reason they had the wrong address. So, I finally called them and I said, like, did I not pass because I haven't heard from you? And they're like, no, didn't you get our letter? And I don't know where they sent it, but they didn't send it to me. So anyway, but, like I said, Fred Balsamo got me involved in writing 503, which is now 703. And then I got involved with a lot of people in Section 1. They have been terrific mentors and, wonderful friends. And they said, you should run for the board. And I was like, what are you people crazy? Like, why would I want to run for the board? And they're like, no, no, no. And I think sometimes, Jake, what happens is there are people who see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And so I ran for the Region A at-large board position. And, you have to get up and give your speech. And I gave my speech again in Orlando. I don't know, I keep ending up in Orlando. But I won the seat on the board. So, I've been involved a little bit with the NFHS, serving on a couple of their committees and, with the teaching of the LTC classes and becoming a state coordinator. I've since given that up when I took over as executive director. But, it's really important for people to become involved and make sure that they have go-to people and they don't go it alone. I can't hear you.
Oh, I guess I need to unmute
sorry.
myself. I'm a professional. I was saying, I just think that's so important. I think people need to hear that it's not something that just happens overnight. It's, volunteering and getting involved and, taking those chances that, really move you along in your career. You've had an opportunity to, be that teacher, be that coach, work at middle school and high school, be a school AD, and now, you get to, oversee athletic directors throughout your state. How would you say that the job of an athletic director has changed? Let's go and limit it, not to when you started, but, let's just say maybe the last, 12 or 15 years. How has the day-to-day routine changed for an athletic director?
I think depending on what your role is, if you're just in charge of athletics, because we're a small state, so we do have some people who are assistant principal, athletic director, some teach and have athletic responsibilities. Some are doing activities in athletics. But I think that, there's a lot more involvement now. There's more involvement on the part of parents. There's more expected of each athletic administrator in each school. I think it's a very misunderstood position. And I think it's really key that everybody has a great relationship with your admin team so they understand what the job is. But I think we're problem solvers. And I think that there are admin teams who are realizing that, if it's pouring rain out or, there's some issue, for some reason, we have a good handle on how to fix those things. So, you know, when there's some big event coming up at school, because we plan events on a daily basis, you know, and sometimes it's, you know, 1 or 2 games, and sometimes it's 7 or 8 games, and sometimes they're not all on campus. So, you know, so we're juggling balls in the air all the time. And, you know, I think it's very misunderstood, but I think that the people who do see what you do appreciate it. I know parents really appreciate seeing people, seeing athletic administrators out on the fields at games. It's like every time I see you, you know, you're in the same place I am, and I feel like I'm all over the place all the time. But I really think that a lot more has been put on the plate of the athletic administrator at each school. You know, the job has grown tremendously from, you know, scheduling games and dealing with student athletes. There's so many more components now, and especially, you know, with COVID, you know, we're really concerned about the mental health of the student athlete. And, you know, there's a lot more that we need to be aware of. I mean, if you look at the number of LTC classes that are being offered now, you know, it runs the gamut of everything that we do. So I think that's just, you know, speaks volumes to how the job has changed. But there's more to it than it used to be. And I think justifiably so, because we really need to care about these student athletes in a different way, because sometimes their home situation may not be the best situation.
No, you're absolutely right. There's just so many things that are going on today. You know, you mentioned COVID, which we're going to talk about next, but social media, mental health. Just yesterday, I was part of the pilot course for the new mental health LTI. So it is very much a full plate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go and talk about COVID. You know, we've certainly seen a variety of responses from across the country, and even in our own state in Florida. You know, there's been different ways schools have responded to this. What's going on right now in New Hampshire? You know, here we are in late August recording this. Schools are probably either just starting or getting ready to come back, but what's going on with athletics in your state?
Well, our state athletic association has moved our start date to September 8th. So football was supposed to start on August 14th. Everything else was going to start on the 17th, and they bumped everything out to September 8th. So that's the first date to practice. We do have summer, if you will, is open in New Hampshire. So, so coaches do work with their own athletes throughout the summer. So that was something that athletic administrators were really concerned about. How are we going to navigate this when we don't really know what's going on? So our state athletic directors association started a task force so that we could put some plans in place so that you know, the student athletes would be used to a lot of the protocols once it came time to actually start the fall sports programs. So right now we have school boards meeting more than they really want to meet, because they're trying to figure out what is school going to look like. Is it going to be full in person? Is it going to be hybrid? And what form of hybrid might that be? Or is it going to be full remote? So, you know, every day on the news or in the newspapers, you're reading about, well, this school is doing this and this school is doing that. So there hasn't been any real consistency, even in geographical areas of the state, what people are doing. But of course, the big sports news is who's in and who's out. So I know there's a couple of critical meetings going on tonight. We're I guess, lucky, if you will. We're, like I said, we're a small state. However, we've had about 7,100 cases in the whole state. So, in the big scheme of things, that's really not a lot. And right now we have about 270 active cases in the state. So, our numbers aren't crazy at this point. And we do have a number of southern schools on the Mass border, which that's where our greatest population in our state is. And a lot of those schools are planning to either go hybrid or remote with their learning, but a lot of them are also planning to play fall sports.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out, not just in individual states, but across the country. And again, Captain Obvious here, we've never had to deal with this before. So it's, new ground for all of us. And you talked about it earlier, we're decision makers, we're problem solvers. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations for ADs is, we don't have the answers, and, we think we have an answer, but, the state or the district, does something different. So crazy times.
Right. But people are trying to be creative too. I know that in our largest division, they have chosen each week, you have this rival this week. So you play all your games against that rival that week. So they're trying to isolate it. But they're also trying to play all their rivalry games in week 1 to have those take place. And they're also looking at doing some senior night activities in the first couple of games so that they have the opportunity to honor seniors in case things don't go well as the season progresses.
Yeah, no, and we've seen that as well. The senior nights, the rivalry night. I like that. I think I'm going to, suggest that around our area. So thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Another question we've been asking our guests this past spring, in addition to COVID, we saw an increased awareness in the awareness of social issues and, how they're impacting, various groups. I'm curious, in your opinion, what are some things that we can do as athletic directors in this area to do a better job of being aware of these, social concerns?
Mm-hmm. I think communication is key in a lot of things, but particularly in this, it's not something that you can ignore. It needs to be discussed. And, there's always teachable moments that we have in sports that occur. And sometimes it gets glossed over and, you think, oh, I probably should have addressed it at that time. And I think that because these issues are in the forefront of the news, the media brings it up often, which is good. I think it's important that it's out there, and people do talk about it, and it might not particularly affect your team or your community at that time, but people need to be aware. And, there are different parts of the country who have different social issues than other parts of the country. But, I think that there's a resiliency with our students that, they embrace situations that sometimes you would think that they may not, whether it's, dealing with some of the social injustices, dealing with some of the special needs students in their classes. A lot of times I find that they reach out and they may not have the same color blindness, if you will, that that some other people have. So, I think our world is very different today. from the lens of a teenager than it is from the lens of sometimes older adults. And but I think communication is something that you just have to keep going. It has to be discussed, and it has to be done in a positive way. And you have to be willing to answer the questions, even if you say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find it out.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that. Let's go and shift gears a little bit. Going back to your days as a high school AD, what were some of your favorite aspects of the job? What got you excited about going to work each day?
The kids. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed, you know, walking into a practice or walking, because I supervised health and physical education as well. So whether it was walking into a practice or walking into a physical education or health class, and, you know, sometimes the kids just thought you were there for, you know, some other reason, and they'd wave to you. And I'm like, you know, what are they doing? But, or just having the kids stop by my office. I always had snacks on my table, and, you know, sometimes they would come in for a snack, but then they'd sit and talk. And, you know, it's funny because not being in a school now, it's the kids that I miss the most. But it's nice to be in the same community. I live in the same community, and it's nice to be able to, you know, go into a store, and sometimes it's hard to recognize people with a mask on now. But I was checking out at a store the other day, and this girl said, "Hey, Dawes, hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Wait a minute, give me a second," you know, and I was trying to figure out who she was, you know, from the voice and the eyes. And, you know, so we had a nice conversation, but it was always the kids. It was always the kids and the relationship. And, you know, whether I'm out for a walk along the beach and people go by and beep and wave, or hang out a car and yell your name, that always just makes me feel so good, you know. And I think it's those relationships with the student athletes that, you know, they knew when I meant business. They knew what our rules were, and they knew that if they weren't going to abide by them, then there was going to be a consequence. You know, and there were kids sometimes that I'd call into my office for one reason or another, and a lot of it had nothing to do with discipline. And they'd be like, "Why am I here?" You know, and all panicked. I'm like, "Why? Did you do something that I don't know about?" You know, but they were like, "Oh, I wouldn't want to be sitting on this side of the table when I get called down," you know. And I'm like, "Don't worry about it." So.
No, I think the kids and the relationships, you know, are always one and two, and that's how it should be, you know, when you're in our business.
Right.
Well, Carol, this has just been wonderful, but we're not done yet.
Okay.
We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're a veteran AD, and now I'm going to task you with sending out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Carol Dozibrin's athletic director toolbox?
All right. The first one would be communicate, communicate, communicate. That's not 3. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't go it alone. Don't reinvent the wheel. I think that it's important, and I know I mentioned this a lot today, but it's important that you communicate. You know, have a good relationship with your admin. So I would say communication is the first thing. The second one is probably make sure that you have a philosophy of the athletic department, and make sure it aligns with your school mission. That way that you can create rules and regulations and policies that make sense for the whole school community. And I think the third thing is probably understand the school culture and see what areas may need improvement. Don't be afraid to work with different groups or individuals to make things better, because it will be a direct reflection on the school, the athletic department, and you as other teams come into your community to compete.
Well, that is some outstanding advice from one of the best athletic directors in our profession. Carol Dozibrin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Jake. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I hope everybody has a great day. Please join us again next time on the Educational AD Podcast.